Chill. Before you dislike the video and leave a comment telling me how wrong I am, just hear me out. For those of you who don't know, Genshin Impact is a free-to-play RPG for the PS4, PC, and mobile phone that released about 2 weeks ago. I've given it a little time to sort of sit with the game and all that to be sure it was alright, because there's no way a free-to-play gacha game would be better than Mr. AAA Nintendo Golden Boy Link, right? Well, the more I think about it, in some ways that's right, and in some ways that's wrong. Genshin Impact does a lot of things right that Breath of the Wild actually got wrong in my opinion. And I get that, again, Breath of the Wild is part of the legendary Zelda franchise, and Genshin Impact is a recent new on the block game. Also, a lot of people see Genshin Impact as a Breath of the Wild clone, and while as far as the assets go, I'd actually agree with you, I'd say you're right. However, when it comes to comparing Genshin Impact and Breath of the Wild, I actually want to talk about a couple of things and why I think Genshin Impact is a little better in some ways than Breath of the Wild. First off, it's context, meaning the story and how it presents itself, but also the world itself. Is the world interesting to explore, and does it make me want to play more of this game? Is the story compelling? Can I buy what you are trying to sell me? Or I guess in Genshin Impact's case, what you're not selling to me. But you gotta get me interested in this world to get me to actually care about it and spend time with it. Next up is combat. Both of these games require an extensive amount of combat, so is the combat fun? Does it make me want to come back and play it again? A game and how it plays is really important to me because that's essentially how the player directly interacts with the game itself, so does the combat make me want to come back and learn all of the mechanics of the game? Also, if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like, share the video, and subscribe with notifications on. And that being said, let's get into it. Alright, first up, let's talk about the context of both of the games. I'll talk about the story of Genshin Impact briefly because the story isn't entirely done as the game is still receiving updates. So Genshin Impact's story is about a character that was separated from his sister, or brother if you chose the female character, after battling an evil god and is still trying to find her. And the basic premise of Breath of the Wild, if you somehow avoided this game for this long, is that you're playing as Link, Princess Zelda's personal guard whose sole purpose is to protect her from harm. 100 years ago, he teamed up with her and 4 people called champions with their divine beasts to fight against Calamity Ganon. After falling and failing to beat them, Link has been awakened 100 years after the Calamity and is trying to take back the 4 divine beasts and defeat Calamity Ganon once and for all. And like I said earlier, Genshin Impact's story isn't entirely finished, so I can't compare them fairly. However, based on what I do know, of course, I gotta give it to Breath of the Wild, because right now, Genshin Impact's story isn't really all that compelling and it doesn't really get me interested. That could change over time, but right now, Breath of the Wild is the king in that category, and there's not much more to it. And with Age of Calamity about to release as well, it's only gonna get better with adding more context to the lore. However, there are a couple of things that Genshin Impact actually does better than Breath of the Wild as far as context and the world goes. So I'll take you back a little bit. When I first played Breath of the Wild as a wee little moose, I was excited because I had heard this world was really expansive and exploring it, going through every little nook and cranny was really fun. And I was right. Breath of the Wild had a really great world that was fun to explore. The views were breathtaking, little minigames that were actually exciting, like the little snowball rolling minigame that you could use to farm rupees, looking for the Korok seeds, and of course doing the shrines. It was a fun game that added a lot of things to do post-game in the sense that when you beat the story, you were actually very far from beating the game. And I really enjoy stuff like that. I enjoy tons and tons of post-game, which is a part of the reason I enjoy Genshin Impact as well, even if it's not technically a post-game. But what I enjoy in Genshin Impact more than Breath of the Wild is actually the way quests work and what you get for exploring the world. Since Genshin Impact is a free-to-play game, you're gonna have microtransaction, because like Thanos in Endgame, it's unfortunately inevitable. However, there is a way to avoid that altogether, by actually playing the game. By doing side quests, you earn the currency you need to do pulls instead of spending money. And I like that system because it essentially gives a purpose to side quests and grinding for items and grinding for currency in Genshin Impact because it makes it actually fun. In most gacha games, grinding is pretty boring and tedious. For example, in Kingdom Hearts Dark Road, grinding is a chore, you cannot tell me otherwise. You leave your phone on auto battle for a couple of hours and go do whatever you want to do and then come back and reset it and just do it all over again. There's no level of interaction between the player and the game when you're trying to achieve an objective or grind for levels or weapons, and if it's there, it's almost always a negative interaction. But what Genshin Impact does right is changing the concept of grinding entirely by tying it to just playing the game, which is why I want to bring back the concept of Genshin Impact being a Breath of the Wild clone back into play. Because if you want to pull for those 5-star characters like Diluc or Venti and get those weapons or items, you essentially have to go out and play what is Breath of the Wild. You have to go on quests, go through the adventure log and complete that, explore the world, do daily commissions, which is honestly a mechanic I don't mind. Where Breath of the Wild falls short in that aspect was, aside from personal achievement, there was really no reason to go do those quests or complete the compendium or do those things. There's no trophy, no crown, no nothing for 100% in the game, which was honestly one of the chinks in its armor for me. You can collect the Korok seeds if you want, but you only get Hetsu's gift, which is basically, yeah. And if you complete the compendium, what do you get? You get a picture that you can't even look at. Exploring the world is fun, taking nothing away from Breath of the Wild or its world, but if you explore the world to its highest level possible, you get nothing. And honestly, I think that's one of the biggest middle fingers I think I've ever seen a game give its players for playing the game. It's funny, don't get me wrong, but it's also really underwhelming and disappointing. Which is why I like Genshin Impact setup better, because it actually has merits and gives legitimate, tangible rewards to the player the more they interact with the world, and has them engaged while doing so. Basically what it comes down to for me is, if you want to give people incentive to take part in your gacha game, it better be a damn good gacha game. And Genshin Impact delivers.
I like it, cut G.
Another thing I want to look at is the gameplay of Genshin Impact versus that of Breath of the Wild, specifically the combat and its mechanics. Breath of the Wild's combat is interesting because you essentially get out of it what you put into it. So if you go and do all the quests and get all the weapons and play around with the different runes, you have the potential to pull off some crazy combos and make your enemy's day really bad. And that's great honestly because it's up to you to get to it and really explore all of the different combat options and make the gameplay your own. When the combat is at its peak, it's fantastic. It's really cool when you're able to actually get the flurry rushes, it makes you feel like a superhero. But top to bottom, it's pretty solid. But I personally enjoy Genshin Impact's combat a little more because I think that's where it starts to form its own identity from that of Breath of the Wild. So Genshin Impact has 21 playable characters, each wielding one of 7 different elements and everyone having different combat styles. For example, you could have 2 fire users, but one is an arrow user, one could use lances. And a party can have up to 4 characters at a time, so it's up to you to choose a party that works for what you want to do. And I think that's where Genshin Impact begins to form its own identity, because why I like Genshin Impact's combat more than Breath of the Wild is just because it feels better. In Breath of the Wild, when you were able to get a flurry rush, it felt great because it felt satisfying. But that was kind of it to me. Outside of that, combat really didn't have an all that great feeling. Like, I was excited to fight the bosses because of narrative weight, and Lionel's were fun because it was really satisfying to dodge the charge attacks they did and get a punish, but outside of that, the everyday enemies you had to fight like the Bokoblins weren't really all that fun in my opinion. Every time you fight something in Genshin Impact, it feels great. Like, there was a point where I was actually just looking for things to fight, looking for things to throw hands with. That and the pacing of the combat is a lot faster than that of Breath of the Wild, which is a personal big thing for me when it comes to whether or not I enjoy the combat. When you can get some nice combos on an enemy, it feels amazing and it's a lot more common and happens more frequently, which makes me want to come back and play it. And with the concept of character switching and different elements, it's fun to experiment and come up with different elemental attacks and see what kind of works and what doesn't with the characters you have. Being able to start a combo with one and then quickly switch to another is actually really fun. Like using water and ice combination to freeze your enemies, or starting a fire and using wind to spread the fire, or use a freaking fire tornado. Okay, come on, that is so much fun. That's really fun to me and I love coming up with different ways to fight in this game. While it doesn't have the sort of depth or complexity that Breath of the Wild has, I honestly think there's something to be said about its simplicity. It doesn't have a million attacks and a million different mechanics to make use of, but it's still just a fun time and I enjoy playing in this world more than Breath of the Wild. Also, another thing towards Genshin Impact having better combat, your weapons don't break. When I found out that was the thing, that was amazing because I got real tired real fast when I was fighting enemies in Breath of the Wild and went for a punish and all my weapons just broke and suddenly I'm going up against the Guardian or the Embodiment of Darkness with a tree bench and a pot lid. I understand why they did it because weapons don't last forever, but lord, it was just not a fun time. Both games have things that I like and things that I don't like about them. For example, I really don't like the fact that Genshin Impact is a gacha game when it could have easily been a AAA title on its own merits. And I don't like that Breath of the Wild's combat is great when it's great, but average when it's not. But at the end of the day, they're both games I enjoy and want to come back to play for a while, but I feel like I'm going to have a lot more run in Genshin Impact than Breath of the Wild personally. But hey, enough of me ranting, what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments, and hey, if you stuck around to hear me out for this long, why not consider leaving a like and hitting that sub button for more content? My name is Moosewayne1, and remember to stay strong and keep moving forward. Peace out.
So dance while I put you